100 Winters, Retracing the Great Race Against Death. Written by Jonathan Nathaniel Hayes. Illustrated by Caleb Gingras. Chapter 8, The Run to Ruby. The rising sun briefly ignited the treetops at Bible camp, casting them in a golden glow. It was a fleeting but welcome sight. Just as quickly the sun retreated behind its thick blanket of clouds, where it had dwelt and would remain for most of our sojourn down the Yukon. After a hearty breakfast of kibble, salmon, and beaver for the dogs, I began hitching the team. My heavy hitters, Jester, Coyote, Kuna, Leif, Blackie, Katahdin, and Kineo, were slamming into their harnesses, brimming with energy and eager to run. But my leaders had lost their spark. On this day, I would be retracing the runs of two more native mushers, Dave Cornick and Harry Pitka. Little was recorded of Corning's leg except that he averaged a steady 8 miles per hour. Pitka pushed into Ruby that night at an even faster 9 miles per hour on firm, fast trails. Judging by my leader's sluggishness leaving Bible camp, I knew I'd be nowhere near those paces. The 200 miles of plowing through heavy, wet, unpacked snow had taken its toll. Plotting a course in those conditions was mentally exhausting, tedious, relentless work for both musher and dogs. Now we were on the Yukon River. Iditarod mushers often warn how its flat, featureless sprawl can deaden a dog's spirit. Without the stimulation of hills, turns, or new sights and smells, even the best leaders grow bored. Over the next few days, I'd learned just how deeply that monotony could sink into a team. Not from fatigue, but just sheer boredom. The dogs weren't tired. In fact, those further back in the team were pulling hard. But my leaders lagged. As they slowed, the trailing dogs began to overtake them, tangling lines and creating chaos. I tried rotating in fresh faces up front, hoping to spark something new. Instead, it was a circus. Inexperienced dogs more interested in playing than in leading. I cycled through every possible combination. Spot a strong puller, promote them. They'd surge for a few hundred yards, then fizzle out. Before long, my wheel dogs were in the lead and my leaders were dragging in the back. It was a mess. Then I noticed him. One dog just ahead of the wheel, pulling like his life depended on it. Back arched, ears flat, tails tucked, laser focused. That dog is acting like a leader, I muttered. Which one is that? He'll lead us. I was halfway from the sled to the dog when it hit me. Druid. Insulted by his demotion, he was working like a dog possessed, determined to prove me wrong. All right, buddy, I said, unhooking him and leading him forward. If I put you back up here, no games. I clipped him back into lead. He faced forward, slammed his harness, and barked once, a rallying cry. The team responded. With Druid's pride reignited, the team came alive. That day, he and I struck a new understanding. He learned that his position carried expectations and consequences. His position was earned and could not be assumed. And I heard his message loud and clear. This team's not getting to know him without me. Maybe you could appreciate me a little bit more. And I did. From then on, I pampered Druid and Vodka, our oldest, most reliable leaders. If I thought they might want it, extra food, more rest, a scratch on the ears, I'd make it happen. Temperatures plummeted again, hardening the slush into a crusty shell. Yes, but the Yukon River was still alive beneath our feet. More than once I found myself mushing within inches of open water. Other times, I crossed drum ice where the river recedes and refreezes lower down, leaving a hollowed gap under the crust. The dogs, light and nimble, floated across, but my sled often punched through, dangling like a spider on silk, water gurgling below like a throat waiting to swallow us up. I clung to the handle bow, keeping my feet on the runners, while 16 sepulas heaved me back to safety. In fact, this river later claimed the life of Harry Pitka, the native musher who ran this portion of the trail a century earlier. He was hauling freight on the same stretch later in life when the unforgiving river called his name. Running dogs across it was risky. I couldn't imagine the hazards my snow machine teammates faced. I wish I could warn them, but all I could do was pray their skill met fortune and that the Yukon would treat us better than it did poor Pitka. At long last, the ridge to Ruby loomed. Nearly 1 a.m., I saw Caleb waiting on the riverbanks, waving me toward the steep, icy climb into the village. Beside him stood a stranger. "Hi there," I replied, mustering my southern childhood manners despite the exhaustion. "Sorry to keep y'all waiting." "I'm Nate Titus," he said, voice quiet in the cold night air. The name buzzed in my foggy brain. It was familiar but distant. "Good to see you," I replied, buying time. "Follow me," Nate said. "Jamie and Jeff have your dog's soup ready, and the village has food for you too." Even as I focused on maneuvering the dogs up a steep hill through the sleeping village, I couldn't connect the dots. Nate Titus. Nate Titus. And then I got the hint I needed. As we reached the spot chosen to camp the dogs, he looked over my team. "Good-looking dogs. Mine are a mix of Siberian and Malamute." Ah, he's a musher, I thought. Of course. Nate was the grandson of Bill McCarty, one of the original native Serum Run mushers. A century ago, his grandfather ran the Serum through 28 miles of blinding winds from this very spot. Cynthia Erickson had connected Nate and me before the expedition, and we'd corresponded in the months leading up to the run. I found it easier to admit my slowness than to keep pretending, so I greeted him again, this time with a handshake and a hug. Nate and his father were among the few Athabascans still holding on to the dog mushing tradition along the Yukon. It was an honor to meet him in person after all those messages. "Why don't you hitch up your team and mush out with me tomorrow?" I offered several times. Each time he politely declined, explaining that his dogs weren't in condition yet. I assured him that even a green team could outperform my demoralized crew at present, but he wouldn't budge. By the time the dogs were fed and bedded, it was nearly 2 a.m. I was expected to speak to the school children at 7:30 in the morning. We said goodnight. Nate promised to see me off in the morning. I woke the next morning determined to feed and harness the dogs before my school presentation, so I could leave right after. But I was torn. The dogs needed a break. They weren't physically tired, just mentally spent. Ruby was warm and welcoming. It would have been an ideal place for a reset. But something in me said, keep moving. During the school visit, Nate sat and helped answer questions. The kids were fascinated, not just by the dogs, but also by the snow machines. That's when I discovered Jamie was a natural speaker. From that day forward, I gave Jamie space in our presentations to share about his snow machines and for Caleb to talk about filmmaking. As the kids came out to see us off, Nate lingered nearby. Jamie and I hatched a quiet plan. "Nate, mush my team out of town." Really? Yeah, I could do that. Are you sure?" "We'll hitch the sled to the snow machine to get you out of town and down off this hill to the river. Then we'll cut you loose. I'll catch up with you a few miles downriver, and you can ride the machine back." Nate agreed. The crowd's elation made it clear this plan was a hit. Who better to mush the Centennial Serum Run team out of Ruby than their own hometown musher and descendant of the local legend? Still, I worried whether my dogs would perform for him. Druid in particular is peculiar. He's the most tireless athlete I've ever known and my most dependable leader, but he doesn't run lead for anyone else. Jamie loves to tell people that the time he tried to drive my team out of my kennel with Druid in lead, and Druid wouldn't hit the trail without me. To avoid trouble, I borrowed Jeff's Scandic wide track and went ahead of the team, making sure Druid saw me. It worked, but it caused some confusion among the dogs. If the boss is up there, then who's on the sled behind us? We passed scenic hills as we left Ruby. At one moment, I turned around and looked back from the machine to soak it in. The grandson of Bill McCarty, running my Cephalus on the same portion of the serum route his grandfather did a century ago. It was one of those magical moments of the expedition for me. A few miles out, Nate and I stopped and said our goodbyes. He took the machine back and I took the dogs forward. It had been a beautiful start to the day, filled with community and connection. Now all faded away, but the swoosh of the runners and the hush of the Yukon. Within a few hours of the day, though, nostalgia gave way to survival. This time, however, the life hanging in the balance would not be my dogs or my own. You've been listening to 100 Winters, Retracing the Great Race Against Death. If you're enjoying these free audio downloads, then I want to ask you to return the favor and order the book on Amazon, or you can check out our website where you can get yourself an autographed copy. Until next time, happy trails.